I've just been so blown away by everything that's happened over these last 2 days. It's amazed me, the progress we've made as a movement, the new connections that are being made, the new and old faces, and all of the learning that we've been doing. And so I just wanted to take a moment to kind of circle back to some of these goals that you saw at the beginning of the conference that Louise and Jeff had introduced to us, just to take stock, because I think one of the things we want to do and not forget is take that moment to celebrate how collectively all of your efforts are coming together to tell a really impressive story of impact. And so I think we set these goals in 2015. This first one we thought was bold. We thought it was aspirational to try and leverage $100 million into people's pocket. Since then, even with our financial empowerment champion partners, our financial empowerment and problem-solving partners, $128 million. We heard from CVITP that $1.5 billion is leveraged every year. It's extraordinary the amount of money that's being put in people's pockets through this work, and this money really makes a difference in people's lives. And so this, we really undershot this one, which we rarely do. So we're going to have to revise this one to $1 billion or something like that. So, but it shows all of those little things that we're doing together. They add up to make a really impressive impact story. The second one is one that we're still struggling with in terms of how to measure it, but I think we've heard from Carmen, we've heard from others, how critically important it is that individuals have the financial information, education, and help they need to improve their financial well-being. You know, our financial lives are becoming more complex. More of the onus is falling on us to make decisions in our financial lives. It's becoming trickier. And so I think we're all coming to the conclusion that this work is actually a public service. We've been doing this often off the sides of our desk with short-term funding. And so what we're really looking forward to is working together to figure out how can we make this case to make sure that in every community and every individual that needs this support, they can have access to it. And so I think we're starting to build that case. RESPs, fun fact, when I first started at Prosper Canada 10 years ago, my first job was actually coordinating an RESP project. And so we didn't have all you smart people to tell us the way to do it. We didn't have SmartSaver. And so the best thing that we could do in a given day is find a parent that was like willing to listen to us, grab them and drag them to a financial institution, and go through the whole process with them. And if we opened up one RESP in a day, it was a really good day. And so we have been slogging along the RESP journey. We've made huge progress. There's huge, amazing collective impact work happening here. ESDC has been such a great partner in this work. But if we're going to see the gains that we need, if we want to move past the 3% gains to double-digit gains, I think there's a structural challenge here. I think we need to have more conversations around some of the structural issues that are preventing individuals from opening these accounts. Because what we want is every kid to know that post-second education is possible. We want every kid to know that they've got an account in their name and there's an expectation and a hope for them to go to post-second education. We're not quite there yet, but we're making some good progress. RDSPs, we have learned a lot from the leadership and the collective work of all sectors happening in BC. They're beating us right now. We've learned that over the last couple of days. They're beating us by quite a bit in terms of the take-up rate on this work. And so I think one thing that I've taken from this conference, and hopefully you have, is an inspiration to learn more about the RDSP, figure out how we can be promoting this product, and think about how we can have strategies to engage other sectors in this work to move up the uptake rate and this important benefit. Protecting consumers, I think this is something that we're all quite passionate about, and we were really looking at fringe financial services, and as you can see, there's huge gains that have been made since 2015 when we set these goals. So 9 provinces have passed legislation, and so it's time to shame the other ones. But you're starting to see some momentum with this work, and Momentum, the organization, has been such a great help to show leadership in this direction. And so we've been really excited to see that work, and we hope over the next couple of years we keep going in that direction. The integration of financial empowerment, this is a really big priority for the steering committee. We see, like I said earlier, financial empowerment as a key public service. We see financial governments at all levels having an opportunity not only to fund this work in communities, which we think that they should do, but figure out how they can leverage all of their different channels, all their different departments to do this work. And we're starting to see this woven into poverty reduction strategies. We heard from folks like New Brunswick and Toronto and Edmonton at one of the sessions around the trailblazing work that they're doing to integrate this into their work in a way that's improving outcomes that they care about. And so we're really looking forward to continuing this work. And then building access to safe and affordable financial products and services. This one is one we struggled with. We didn't really know how to measure this one, but I think Eliza gave us a nice framework today to think about what does this look like and how can we start measuring what it means to build strategies to make sure that we're actually moving towards greater financial inclusion and financial health. And so we're looking forward to working with financial institutions and all of you to help move in that direction. And so we're making enormous progress. We set all these goals to be achieved by 2020, and so I think we're well on our way. We're looking forward to engaging with you guys to figure out how we can be even more successful. But I just want to take a moment to recognize all of the hard work that you've all been doing, and you should all be super proud. So a round of applause for everyone. And so this is an opportunity where we can take stock of the last couple of days and everything we've learned to really appreciate some important people that have helped to put this conference on and helped to make sure this movement is strong and thriving. If any of you have put on a conference before, you know that it is an insane amount of work. And so it's something that there's a lot of people that have been involved with making it happen. I think this is, Louise, where you wanted me to wrangle you up here. So Louise is going to help me.
So I actually wasn't on the agenda for this section, but I insisted. I just wanted to echo some of what Adam has said in terms of the progress that we've made towards the goal and the goals and the collective effort that it took. And ABLE was designed from the beginning to be a launching pad for creating that collaboration and increasingly more cross-sectoral collaboration. So in talking to so many people over the last 2 days, some of the connections that people are the most excited about are the connections that they've made with people across sectors. So one of my contacts that I'm really hanging on to is a contact with CRA that I think is really going to advance our work in Manitoba. But the reason why I wanted to say a few last words is I just really want to acknowledge the leadership and the heavy lifting that Prosper Canada in particular has done to make this ABLE possible. Hold your applause. They, in a sense, have been the nucleus of pulling this conference together, but they've engaged with the broader network in such a respectful and inclusive way. And so we basically threw a bunch of ideas at them. They took on the best of our ideas, and they very gracefully kind of set aside some that maybe weren't so good, some of which I think I came up with.
Yeah, no, we didn't accept those ones.
Yeah. But in particular, I also wanted to recognize Adam, who I think has been at the center of leading the charge and sort of corralling all of us and coordinating our efforts. And I did an in-depth study at this conference over the last 2 days. I've consulted with the folks that put on all of the other ABLEs that have been held previously, and they're nodding their head. And we unanimously came to the conclusion that this has been the best ABLE ever.
Thank you. She said that because she wants us to host the next one. So That's her way of doing that. So really, really appreciate that, Louise, and all of your leadership. And so now it's time for me to extend gratitude and thanks to others that have been involved with making this possible. So first of all, thank you so much to all of the speakers and moderators. You guys have been brilliant. We've learned so much over the last 2 days, and we really appreciate your time and coming to share with us. Also, our co-MCs, Jeff and Louise, have been amazing. So, thank you so much to them. Also to our generous sponsors. So this is not possible without the sponsorship that we get. And so we'd love to acknowledge our event sponsors, TD Bank Group, and the Intuit Freedom Foundation. Susan has been such a great supporter of our work. Gold sponsors, Each One Teach One, the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, Van City Credit Union, silver sponsors, Power Corporation of Canada, and then all of the sponsors you see scrolling on the screen. So can we give all of the sponsors a big round of applause? And then this conference would not have been possible without the hard work of the conference working group members who have worked, I can't tell you how tirelessly, on making this possible and putting this all together. And so you guys have been so amazing. I've gotten nothing but amazing feedback from everyone. And so I really want to recognize the great work of the conference working group. So thank you guys. And Louise has already done this, but I too want to thank the Prosper Canada staff who 2015, which was not the best conference ever, apparently. I was super involved in, but this one, the staff that I work with took over. They're like, we'll take it from here. You just say thank you to us afterwards. So it's been amazing to see the Prosper Canada staff in action. You've seen it over the last couple of days. They are amazing, and so they've really helped to put this together. And so I'd really like us to recognize that great work. So. And the Family Service of Greater Vancouver have been amazing. We really appreciate them as a local partner, a partner in this conference, and we're just so excited to get to know them, to really figure out how we can spark energy in this area and really make sure that we're bringing more people into this ABLE movement. And so I really want to thank the Family Services of Greater Vancouver as well. So. And then finally, we want to thank our event planners, Bernadette, who's at the back there. Hey, Bernadette, from Sea to Sky. They make everything so smooth. It's been amazing, and we really appreciate them. My buddy in the AV booth, I want to make a shout out to. He's been awesome. He's been giving me tips on music suggestions, and apparently we've got similar music tastes, so that's been fun. And then the hotel has been great and very gracious to us, and so we really appreciate all that they've done. And so thank you to the hotel. So by now you should have received in your email in your inbox an email inviting you to complete a post-conference survey. Anyone that doesn't fill this out can't come to the next conference. So I want you to open that and fill it out. We really listen to your feedback. We want to do better. 2018 was better than 2015, like I said. So we're still trying to hit that new height. Louise is laughing. So please give us feedback. Tell us how we can do better. We really want to keep improving. And so that's it. I'm excited, and I've gotten such great feedback from the opening. And so I'm really excited to invite back up Kwestin to the stage to officially close the conference. So thank you. Sorry, just before you go up, I missed somebody. The graphic designer has been brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, we take these things and we actually use them as wallpaper all over our office, but we'll take pictures of those and make sure that they get out to everybody, so thank you so much. All right, Kwestin. Thank you.
Hi, Adam. Thank you, Adam. Hi, Winan. Siamnasiaya, Eats and Trial. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I trust you're all well. I to squalwin quis ease it quitsnala to swallup I muster yoch. I'm very glad to see so many people here. Hi tap to swallup quith e alap quith me tunaskakip. And I want to thank you for coming to this conference. It's been very interesting for me to sit here for the last little while. I want to build on the idea that this is the best conference ever. I think one of the contributing factors to that is the vision of your group in acknowledging Musqueam's underlying interest in this land. And I hope that your inclusion will expand. When I was watching the statistics on the screens, I noticed that no reserves were included on reserve populations. And I can understand why. On reserve, we cannot mortgage our lands. So if we want to build a home, we have to pool our resources as a community and guarantee individual loans with cash in the bank. We don't have political parties on reserve. If we want to register a political party for my small community of a few hundred acres, as our neighbors in Vancouver or Richmond do, or in the province of British Columbia, or nationally, because we're federal land, we would have to register candidates in half of the ridings in Canada, even though we don't believe we're Canadian, and even though we're only concerned with the 600 acres of Musqueam. You're probably all aware that our average lifespan is 15 years shorter than Canadians. So there are a lot of differences created by the different political communities that we live in. Yet the recent commitment of Canada and British Columbia to implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples includes some significant changes in domestic policy, not just human rights policy. Accessing the land for economic development has been impeded because there is not agreement between First Nations and the Crown on the benefit of resource development, let alone who owns the resources. So I was really pleased to see that in your deliberations you had included models from other countries, and particularly Australia, who adopted the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People in 2007. And so they are, in some ways, significantly more advanced in the reconciliation process than Canada is. There are other models to consider. Over 20 years ago, as a member of our elected council, I was part of several delegations that went to the United States of America to research the activities of members of the National Congress of the American Indian. In the United States of America, the tribes have what is called territorial co-sovereignty, so that if your tribal boundaries are, say, Montana and Washington State, territorial co-sovereignty means that you have the same authority as either of those states on your tribal lands. And when we did this research, I had the honor to have a letter accepted by the Lakota Sioux, who allowed me to shadow their chairman for a day. Yesterday, I believe, I mentioned the Indian Reorganization Act of 1932, and as a consequence of that, there are not chiefs, there are chairmen to the tribes. And when I was visiting that small nation of 150 people, I learned that they had 16,000 employees. 16,000 employees. When I arrived, I wanted to learn about the community they lived in, so I left the hotel and I went to the 7-Eleven and I picked up some local little community papers and some snacks. And I went to the till, and this is, like I say, more than 20 years ago. And when I got to the till, the gentleman working in the 7-Eleven asked me, "Are you a native?" which is their term for indigenous people there. And because of my previous experiences in Canada, I thought, oh boy, here we go. And it's embarrassing to say now, but I checked behind me and I made sure I wasn't moving fast because he might have a gun. And I was very surprised to find that I had completely misinterpreted his behavior. I told him that, yes, I was Native, but I was not Sioux, I was visiting them. And he was delighted. And he told me, "I'm glad to meet you. I just wanted to tell you that even though this store is not owned by the tribe, we regard their chairman as our chairman in this county." He said, since this chairman has taken office, unemployment has plummeted, and we are all better off. And when I tried to pay him for the papers and the snacks, he wouldn't take my money. Wouldn't take it. We went to a series of conferences over the years, and we would, of course, be fascinated by the sessions, but perhaps more interesting than that was the individual, day-to-day sort of knowledge we acquired just riding in an elevator and stuff like that. We would hear young Indigenous people in their mid-20s comparing notes on the success of their tribal ventures. And we would hear conversations that I have never heard in that age group in Canada. We would hear them talk about the alliances they're creating in their territories and their ability to influence state elections. We heard them, these are people in their 20s, comparing how many properties they owned. When I was shadowing the chairman of the Lakota Sioux, one of their agenda items was whether or not they should buy the Minnesota Vikings, because they owned 3 casinos, and the state was thinking of putting slot machines in the stadium because the Vikings weren't doing well back then. And the chairman rejected the idea because those slots were only active when the games were playing, and $450 million then was too much. But now, more than 20 years after we did that research, I can see the possibility that in another 20 or 30 years, Canadian First Nations might be halfway to that comfortable place where our southern relatives are now. More than 20 years ago, I signed the document along with the rest of the elected council, committing our nation to the British Columbia Treaty process. And we never got past stage 4 because the Crown was not interested in discussing what we regarded as substantive issues, like land ownership. With the adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, Canada is now challenged by Section 11 of that document, which states words to the effect that lands alienated without the informed consent of Indigenous people must either be compensated at fair value or returned. Well, in Musqueam's territory, the tax roll of the municipalities is over $1 trillion. So that's a considerable challenge. I don't think it's impossible. I think the problem is that previous stereotyping has limited the options that people consider. The idea has long been held that First Nations would be absorbed into Canada. That hasn't happened after 150 years, and I don't think it needs to happen. The land could be returned to us through a political mechanism and not a financial mechanism. The Queen is the Duke of Lancaster. She's the Duke of Normandy. We all know the feudal history of Europe and how a duke would pay homage for the lands they hold. And I do not see why the Queen couldn't preserve her land registry, which you think of as the Canadian Land Registry or the British Columbia Land Registry, through a political gesture of homage to the nations who own the lands. That would fulfill what might otherwise be an awkward obligation. But something like that can only be done if Canadians trust First Nations. And one of the reasons that we remain unknown, as I mentioned yesterday, For more than 65 years, it was illegal for us to share who we are with your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. When that prohibition was lifted, it was a different world than it is today. And our ancient laws were dismissed as myths. I can assure you that trust requires faith in the honesty and integrity of other people. When my grandfather decreed that my obligation would be to bridge the gap between the industrial world and Musqueam more than 60 years ago, he did so convinced that Canada and Canadians were indeed good, decent people. This, in spite of the life he lived, the attrition rate he saw in our community, and the fact that he buried 3/4 of his children before they reached adulthood. That did not dissuade him from the certainty that there is goodness in our neighbors. I can assure you that cultural accommodation is not onerous. That has been the way of life for First Nations for more than 150 years. And we are still able to enjoy our culture, our families, and those lands we hold. What we can do is share more of who we are, because we understand that you as individuals, each journeying in your own soul canoe, need to know on a personal level that your quality of life and the quality of life for your children and grandchildren will not be impacted by implementation of basic human rights for First Nations. Today, you will be going home. Many of you have traveled a long way to be here. The host First Nations in your territory might well be treaty nations. If you travel any distance, they most certainly will have a very different culture than Musqueam. And their history, their story, their oral history may well be very different. But that is not so different than your everyday life and interaction with your coworkers and neighbors whose antecedents come from different continents, from different language groups, different cultures, religions, and values. And we look forward to participation in the economy that you work with every day in your profession. As the barriers slowly disappear, there will be much more opportunity to build a better life for all of us. Musqueam accepted an out-of-court settlement in 2008 that tied together 4 of our pieces of litigation. At the time, in 2008, the value of the package with land and cash was estimated at $250 million. We're now developing what was once called Block F on University Boulevard, near the University of British Columbia. We've renamed that Lalem, which means home, and we're building 1,450 residential units and 30,000 square feet of commercial. Together with our neighbors, our kin from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh, our combined portfolios, when fully built out in 20 years, will support a population larger than that which currently lives in Kamloops. And we have had to buy this land, our own land, back in order to do this. And I say this so that you know that the transfer of Crown-held lands to the rightful owners, to the First Nations, is going to create access to those opportunities which are now currently blocked. Once I was young. I was ambitious once. The economic opportunities that I sought to develop in the past did not come to fruition because there was no trust. Now, I see some real and significant changes. Part of those changes comes from changes within our community, changes of how we see ourselves, changes in how we see you as neighbors. I'm sure you're aware that residential school syndrome is a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. You're probably not aware that when American war vets returned from Afghanistan with PTSD, it was found that there was a 24% rate of induced comorbidity through attention deficit disorder. In the only study of ADD on Indian reserves, that is the rate of ADD we have on Indian reserves, while the national average is just over 4%. So in order to deal with this at Musqueam, we are now in the second year of a program where all applicants to our employment and training program are screened for learning disabilities and psychological disorders, and they're referred to a registered psychologist, and we base our training and work placement plan on those outcomes. The first year we did this was 7 or 8 years ago. It was a pilot. We thought it might never come back, but under the new government, we're now in our second year of this program. Well, last year, I was attending a funeral in our community. I felt a gentle tug on my elbow, and I turned, and one of the participants in our first screening process let me know that in spite of fetal alcohol syndrome, in spite of a diagnosed IQ of 60, in spite of the fact that for the first month and a half of a 6-month program, his uncle had to drag him out of bed every morning, in spite of all that, we had placed him with a restaurant. And he was tugging on my jacket to let me know that he was now the head chef. So, it is not impossible to change the present circumstances. And the key to making those changes happen is to believe in and to trust your neighbors. If it were not for the wisdom of Musqueam's elders, we would have made foolish mistakes. Yesterday, I told you about our great lawgiver, Kayapalano, and that verse of his death song, Awa Tinasisi, to know no fear. That is the law our elders followed when they decided that they should trust the community that had waged genocide against us for almost 100 years at the time they made their decisions. Transition and change is difficult. It's stressful. That's why you must not be alone when you transition. I spoke of the teaching of the soul canoe yesterday. Today, you're going home. Some of you are taking paddles. Some of you are taking bailers. Some of you will take a sail. Some of you will find a current that carries you to your destination quickly, without very much effort on your own part. But some of you will face adversity. You will travel into heavy waves. You'll have to take them head on. You might well wind up in a mist of confusion. And if that happens, you must listen for the hearts, the drumbeat of your family, and travel to that beach where you can rest and restore your strength and plot the next leg of your journey. So I'd like to leave that thought with you. And I would like to say, Seitsam ani ataswalap, I raise my hands to you. This is our gesture of friendship and thanks, no weapons. And I would also like to say, Tayais ni hai, the work is finished. Isla nayam, kwaloch itilam. Let's sing, let's dance, let's laugh. You are going home to your loved ones. Thank you, ni hai.
What wise words and wise teaching. We thank you so much, Kwestin, for joining us. So that's an amazing way to close it. So that's it. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you in Costa Rica in 2020. So safe travels.